So welcome to our December meeting. Happy holidays, and thanks for all being flexible while we rescheduled this a couple of times. We're lucky to have Jay join us today. So I'll jump right in with some really quick group announcements, and then we'll hop over to our speaker introduction and cut to the chase of what we're all here to see today. So really quickly, a little reminder of our code of conduct. We'd love to see you on camera if you're willing and if you're comfortable, but totally understand if you're, eating lunch and you want to stay off camera. But reminder to everybody to just be, friendly and welcoming to one another, and no such thing as a bad question, no stupid questions. We definitely want to hear your active participation throughout this presentation as well. And, that's one of the things that makes this community so special is when we have everybody contributing. So reminder to, participate and be respectful to one another all the time. So some really quick announcements. I'm working on getting recordings for our most recent two sessions. So Alex Kolokolov and Jordan Hulachan will be up on YouTube probably today, if not today, this week. And then we're coming around to year end, and this is usually when we do like some year end planning and planning for next year. So if you're willing to, you can come give feedback to any of our CPUG leaders. So that would be myself, Wesley, Russ, Gaston, Emily, and most recently we're joined by Oscar. So is he on the call right now? I think.
No.
Yeah, well, we'll do an intro for him next time he's available to join. So yeah, if you'd like to, you're welcome to give feedback to any of us directly. And then if you'd feel more comfortable, or maybe you have some more constructive criticism that you'd like to deliver, we're happy to hear it too via anonymous feedback. And I will drop the survey link in the chat as well. So yeah, if there's certain speakers you want to suggest, or if you want to change like the format of things, or you want to see more in-person happy hours, those kind of notes are really helpful for us to see. So we're not just making all of these judgment calls on behalf of everybody in this community. That's it for group intros. I'll pass it over to Wesley to introduce our speaker.
Awesome. Thanks, Alina. So after surviving a power outage from a bomb cyclone, joining us today is ter Heerdt, also known as the Dutch Data Dude, which I have to say is my favorite moniker in the industry. I mean, Jay, I don't know if you came up with that or if someone else did, or yep, okay. But
that was all me.
The alliteration alone is worth the entry. After our meeting today, I recommend checking out his personal website, dutchdatadude.com, to get more of his insights. A little bit on his background. So while starting out as an intern at Microsoft, Jay's worked his way up through the company with a consistent focus on data tools to become the current principal product manager for Power BI. So very, very appropriate person to have presenting for us. Since moving to the US from the Netherlands, Jay discovered a love for making artisanal foods and drinks, including sausages, meats, and beer that he makes from home. Although I think what I found out was that does it make your place smell a little bit? Is that it's a lot to be cooking from home, but I love that. Lastly, his home automation addiction is a topic we should get into if we have the time. So with that, please welcome ter Heerdt.
Well, I mean, this thanks.
Pause. Where's the We need like
thanks,
an applause
Wesley, for the awesome intro, and Alina, of course, as well. Thanks for setting this up, and thanks for the patience in having me. Sorry for moving it a couple times. I think we moved it once or twice. This is the second try now, or the third. I don't know. I lost
just
count.
Once. Yeah, we're all good. We're all good.
I'm gonna start with sharing my screen, so we can get into this. Yeah. So,
nice.
I'm originally from the Netherlands, so that explains the weird name. Don't worry, I go by Jay for anybody that doesn't speak any Dutch, which I assume is everybody on this call except myself. I blame my parents. So I do make beer, I do make sausages, I do like to smoke meat, but I do all of that either in the garage with the doors open for the beer, and the sausages and the meat is smoked outside. So that's not why I'm in this shed outside of my home.
That
Uh,
makes a lot of sense.
so yeah, that's the whole reason. Uh, I do all that. Although I'm in this little garden shed because I needed a bedroom for that I was originally using as a home office for my daughter who was born 2 years ago. So I was pushed out of the house by the little one already. So I don't know what that says about me or her, but I'll leave that up for interpretation on your part. So today we're going to talk about something that's very near and dear to my heart, which is visual calculations, which is something that I invested. I'm almost ashamed to say more than 4 years of my life into, and my working life at least. And so that whole journey started in April 2020, and then it saw the light of day for the public in February 2024. So we're going to talk about what that is, why it's here, why we care about this topic so much, or why I care about this topic so much. And then feel free to use the chat or raise your hand if you have any questions. There will be a specific moment in the presentation that I will pause for questions anyway, but if you have questions while I'm talking, feel free to use the chat. I'll be trying to monitor that, or raise your hand so I can ask you to unmute and you can ask your question then. Sounds good? Cool. So let's get into this then. So you might have seen my face before. As I said before, or as Wesley actually said, I'm a principal product manager on the Power BI team. I am on Blue Sky, so Twitter is my ex social media. Um, and this is my email address as well. And then I'm also colloquially called as a Dutch data dude. That's just an invention of my own that actually really helped me land this job over here in the US. Because it turns out when I was interviewing Kim Manis, who's now the VP of all PM in Fabric, was one of the people who interviewed me, and she actually um, said okay on hiring me without even talking to me. And her comments were literally in the tool that I saw afterwards. I know this guy, this is the Dutch data dude, we should hire him. There's literally the notes she wrote. So yeah, just having that brand name really paid off, I would say. So if anybody is on the fence of the power of personal branding, this is a proof, one proof that personal branding can do a lot for you if you just have like something that's you pick a brand and people remember it and you go after it. So what are we talking about today? Well, this is how most of us write DAX today. And DAX is the part of the product that I own, that I work on. So everything that has been happening in the DAX world for the last 4 years is basically from my brain and my team. I do more stuff than just DAX, but DAX is basically my bread and butter. But this is how I write DAX, and I think everybody here on this call writes DAX, right? You find something online, maybe in a blog, maybe on SQL BI's website, maybe in our documentation, maybe on DAX.guide, maybe on Reddit, wherever. You might actually have, you might be the proud owner of some of these, right? Like that one. Yes, exactly. That one, uh, this one, the heavy, the pill, as they call it. This is a huge one. This thing is very heavy. And so you might read this and then you go, yeah, okay, you read it again. You read it again. You still don't get it. You read it again. You still don't get it. At least if you're anything like me, I am the owner of this language. I still don't get all of this, right? Let alone this. And then, of course, this is a proud Dutch product that I have to show off. This is to Dutch MVPs. If you wanna have the good combination, I think, of books, this is the good theoretical foundation of DAX. This is the advanced. How do I actually get to the bottom of everything and get every last drop of performance out of DAX that I would use this book for. This one is great because it doesn't really give you such foundational knowledge of DAX. That's what this is for, but it's actually very practical. So if you want to know, oh, so how do I use DAX to do intercompany business or that kind of stuff, this book really explains like those use cases. So it's light on the theory. It does some theory. This is better on the theory, I would say, but this stays at theory. This is more practical. So you read those books maybe n times, and yeah, and you try, you copy paste, and you maybe press enter, you cross your fingers, you invoke some higher deity if that's your thing, and yeah, that's it. That's how we do it, right? And I have my process is slightly different because when I get an error or when I'm not comfortable with the DAX that I wrote, and I'm not sure if it does the thing that I needed it to do, I do have an extra loophole. I have Jeffrey on call. I can just go on to Teams and type Jeffrey Wang and call him. That's the inventor of DAX, but not everybody has Jeffrey as a service, and Jeffrey really didn't like having Jeffrey as a service, as a new Azure service in publicly available, really, when I was talking to him about it. So we had to find something else to solve this problem that DAX is apparently very hard for people. And it is weird because here we have Power BI, who claims to be the leading self-service analytics tool in the world. According to some analysts, that's actually true, that claim. But then the core programming language that you're supposed to use when you do any calculation is very hard and requires you to take training or read these books or join groups or just hope for the best. Isn't that strange? Is that supposed to be that way if it's truly self-service? Isn't it supposed to be easier? Like, should you really have to take 21 steps to doing a running sum in Power BI? 21? We're not talking rocket science here. This is literally just addition of numbers. A running sum is, well, I would say my daughter can almost do it. 2 years old, that's a little bit too early. But once you have a basic understanding of math, you can do a running sum. That's not rocket science. You only need addition. You need to know what number, add the next number, add the next number, add the next number, add the next number. Keep going, right? We're not trying to send a rocket to the moon here. It's just addition. And here's the leading BI tool in the market that requires you to do 21 steps to achieve this. That is, in my humble opinion, 20 steps too many. And that's what we're trying to solve. So let's face it, DAX is hard. It's mind-boggling that when you start at Power BI, you have to take training, get the books, or just trust whatever you find on the internet to be successful doing any basic calculation in Power BI. If I had $1 for every person that I see in our telemetry, and I cannot identify you personally, but I can follow you through the product. I can follow unique identifiers through the product, I should say. I cannot follow you. I cannot see your data. But if I had $1 for every new user that I see opening Power BI, getting a new ID in our telemetry, and then typing in the measure formula bar, sales minus cost, or something minus something, or something plus something, and then pressing enter, getting the error that measures expect an aggregate, closing that error, and then closing Power BI and never returning. If I got $1 for everybody that did that, I would not work anymore. I would be retired by now. But this is a problem because people come in with the expectation that Power BI is supposed to be Excel leveled up, right? It's supposed to be that DAX language originally is a lot like the Excel formula language. So people feel at home, they go like, oh, I can get this. And then they try stuff and they go, it doesn't work. And some people try and recover and they go teach themselves, and others just never come back. And so DAX is just really hard. And if you dive deep into what is happening here, the problem is that any DAX statement that gets executed, any dynamic DAX statement that gets executed, is always dependent on the filter context it gets executed in. So you cannot walk up to a measure definition in DAX and say, I know exactly what this is going to return. If you have a measure that is sum of sales amount, arguably the simplest measure ever, sum of sales amount, right? Total of sales amount, that same measure can return the total sales for all products in all countries in all years around the whole world, or the total sales of yellow products in one part of Seattle just last month. That same expression, that same measure, that same couple characters, sum, open parentheses, sales amount, close parentheses, can return completely different results based on the context it gets executed in. But the product never shows you that context. It's nowhere to be found. It's completely opaque. You have zero idea. what it is. Of course, you can inspect it a little bit, you can guess at it, but just looking at it, you go like, I don't know what this will do. That's a problem. Now, the core issue here is the DAX calculations measures are scoped to the model. They're executed independent of each other. So they basically also suffer from performance issues. So if you have a measure and another measure that is referring to the other measure, chances are these will be executed twice. So you generate too many queries that actually you would think, oh, Power BI should be smart enough to reuse whatever halfway result we already pre-calculated with one of the two measures. And sometimes we do, oftentimes we don't. And then on top of that, typical business type calculations like a running sum are very hard to do. And that's challenging because people come from the Excel background, or you have a customer or a manager that goes like, oh, yeah, I can do it in Excel, drag and drop. Why is that so hard in Power BI? Why does it take you hours to implement that in Power BI? Couldn't you do that just in 2 minutes? And then, of course, we have quick measures. Quick measures generate DAX, but it does help to give you those kind of like things, business type calculations, but the DAX it generates is arguably pretty hard to understand. So if you need to make tweaks and validate that this actually is the correct answer, you're still back at square one, where you have to understand the output of the DAX. You have to actually be an expert in DAX to be able to write the DAX yourself to even validate what the tool just outputted to you. Let alone if you ask Copilot or any AI to generate DAX, same problem. Can you trust that? No, because the responsibility is on you to validate the DAX that was just generated, right? And if you don't know the DAX, then how good is the result? You cannot trust it. So what if you could define a calculation in Power BI without having to worry about everything that makes DAX so hard? And what if we made that very easy by writing almost English type functionality here? And what if you could do that with less typing, even if we are at it anyway? So getting you closer and closer to this Excel world where you feel comfortable stepping in from the Excel world and go like, oh, I got this. Not trying to hide DAX from you, not trying to say all of those books and trainings are wrong or you don't need those anymore, just trying to postpone that moment. What if we could do that? Well, that is essentially what we're talking about here today, the journey that we started on 4 years ago, which is called visual calculations. So visual calculations, or visual calcs, as I like to call them as well, they are DAX calculations on a visual. They're not a new language, they're just DAX calculations. And we put those inside of the visual for a reason. There's multiple reasons we did that actually. Is one, it does away with the complexity of DAX, because once a visual is painted onto your screen, imagine a bar chart, the filter context that is making DAX so complicated has already been applied. So that is already known. You already know that that thing has already been applied. You don't have to worry about it anymore. You basically see what you see is what you get. The filter context has been applied. That's it. Now, that is the thing. It also gives you extra tricks because it's now in the visual. It can do stuff that measures can't, because measures are just in the database. They have no idea if you're using this as a query result, in some text, in a bar chart, or let alone a pie chart, which you, by the way, should never use. And if you ever use a pie chart, I will find you. That, be warned. So anyway, that's just a joke, of course. So visual calculations are executed in scope of a visual. They're not in a model, and that's on purpose. This might sound limiting to you, but I'm confident once I show you the demo, you kind of understand why that is. And then on top of that, it has extra tricks, because suddenly now there is a DAX construct that is now part of the visual, so it understands a little bit about the visual structure. So it can do interesting things with that structure, knowing what the X and Y axes are. And then most of the time, you don't have to worry about the complexity of filter context. And this, of course, is a statement, a legal statement. I would say you never have to worry about it, but just in case, not trying to get sued here, we wrote most of the time. Okay, so you might be sitting here and going like, why are you introducing something extra, right? You already had calculated columns, you already had measures. Why are you doing something else? And I like to answer that question by saying, well, calculated columns have benefits. They also have downsides. Measures have benefits. They also have downsides, right? Calculated columns are great. They're very easy to understand. You can look at them row by row by row by row. You can see the stuff they work on, but they are pre-calculated, they're not dynamic, and they bloat your model. Those are the downsides. Measures are great because they don't bloat your model. They're very fast, they're dynamic, but they're subject to filter context, which makes them very hard to understand. So now visual calculations is basically as if calculated columns and measures had a love baby. As happens with two parents, hopefully the baby takes over the best of both parents, and that's what we like to think that visual calculations do. We took the best of calculated columns, row by row thinking, very visual, very easy to understand, and we took the best of measures, the dynamic calculation, and put those together, and that's what visual calcs are. And then, because this is the child of two loving parents, of course the child can do more than the parents can do, right? So it can also learn new tricks that the other parents cannot even dream about, right? Which is referring to the visual structure. So in a nutshell, we're not taking anything away from you, we're just giving you another tool in your toolbox. And why are we doing that is because, and this is a little bit an insight into how my brain works, is I like to think about DAX as a swimming pool. Because if you think about DAX without visual calculations, there's only a deep end to the swimming pool. As I've been explaining until now, if you try your hand at DAX, you better know how to swim, otherwise you'll drown. Right? You'll give up, you get burned, you will just, bang your head against the wall, you have to resort to books and training, etc. It's going to be problematic if you don't know how to swim. With visual calcs, we're adding a kiddie pool to the pool. We're basically saying, hey, there's a way for you to just get your feet wet and walk in, up to your knees, up to your middle, and at some point, when you're ready, if you're ready, go for a swim. Learn how to dive. Learn how to swim proper, right? It's not that the kiddie pool is not attached to the main pool. It is attached to the whole thing. It's a sliding scale. And then you can just wade in further as you're ready, right? So visual calcs are this entry point for beginners. If you're coming from the Excel background, if you're a new user, that's really, really where you should go to get started. And then once you're ready, you can graduate towards measures. So it's not taking measures away from you. It's just a way to ease yourself into that. I hope that works for you, that analogy. So what are visual calculations? They're easy and flexible. What you see is what you get. Okay. So you literally will see in just a second, you'll see exactly the data you will be working with in the context, and you can just test the results right away while you're even typing the calculation. You'll be relying on point and click, so you don't have to do a lot of typing. This is very limited today, but it will improve in the future. But I'll show you some of that. And then you're just working with what you can see. And on top of that, we have interesting new functions that allow you to do very powerful stuff very quickly. And as I've been alluding to already, this thing can do more than the original parents could do, the measures and calculated columns. It can actually refer now to the visual structure because we now have a concept of DAX inside a calculation inside of a visual. And why does this matter? Why do I talk about that visual structure so much? It's because if you think about it, any visual in Power BI can be represented as a matrix. Do this thought experiment. Think of the most complicated visual you ever built in your life in Power BI. Can you represent that visual as a matrix? I think the answer is yes. You can always represent that thing as a matrix. That is the core idea beneath visual calcs. So here's the most important slide, the one slide that I want you to remember. Is, if I can actually click the button, that would be great. There we go. The mental model of visual calcs. What we do is we say, here's a visual. This visual happens to be a column chart. And I'm showing 3 groups on the column chart, right? I'm showing 3 groups and 2 measures. So I'm showing 6 bars in total divided over 3 groups. Okay. What does Power BI need to paint that column chart onto your screen? It only needs 3 columns and 3 rows. 1 to contain the groups, which happens to be years, and then 1 for each measure with a data point for each row, right? I have 3 years, so I have 3 rows, and I have 3 groups because I have 1 group and 3 columns. I have 1 group and 2 measures. With me so far? That's what Power BI needs. Those, let's say 12 cells, if you include the headers, is what Power BI needs. That's all it needs to paint that visual onto your screen. There might be millions of data rows, depending on the data that I'm showing, that actually made up all these numbers. But we're not in the business of showing you multiple millions of data points. I mean, in fact, your customers or yourself multiple million data points every day, you would be tired and you would probably be out of business as a BI analyst, right? Because that's not your goal. Our job is to take that raw data and aggregate it, because most of us, all of us, can only handle about 7 to 9 numbers at a time. We can remember 9 of those separately, let alone millions. We cannot handle that. We're just limited that way. So our business is to take those multi-million data points and aggregate it, sum it, average, whatever, and then represent that in a very easy to consume format, charts. So this is what you will be working with when you're doing visual calculations. You'll be adding calculations the moment the data has been aggregated, the moment the data has been filtered by the filter context and is ready to be represented onto the screen in the pixels, in the column chart. Just before Power BI starts painting that thing onto your screen, you have the opportunity to ingest a calculation. And that, or insert a calculation, actually, not ingest, insert a calculation. And you'll be then working with that aggregated data. So what we're showing you is the bar chart. The column chart. We're showing you what we like to call the visual matrix, which is the representation of that chart. And then what visual calculations are, remember, they are the love baby of measures and calculated columns. They're just a column on that visual matrix. So that visual matrix is the matrix representation of whatever you're looking at in the chart. And then you will be extending that matrix with columns that we like to call visual calculations, influencing what's on the matrix as well as what's on the chart. And you will be writing those calculations inside of this matrix using a formula bar with a language that is called DAX. So any visual can be represented as a matrix. A visual calculation adds a column on that visual matrix, and then a visual calculation is added to the matrix but can be removed or be hidden from the chart. I'll show you that in a second. And then a visual calculation can refer to anything that's on the visual matrix. Those are the 4 key points here. That also means it cannot refer back into the model. For a visual calculation to be able to refer to anything, it needs to be on the visual matrix. And that may sound like a limitation to you, but it's actually on purpose. Because what did I say in the beginning? Filter context is what makes DAX so hard. And if we allowed you to refer back into the model, you would be breaking this little bubble of filter context that you're in. And you would have to worry about, oh wait, I'm executing this DAX statement over here, but it's actually subject to filter context, so I don't really know what the result is going to be. So you would be breaking outside into the wild world, and the complexity creeps back in. So we're putting you inside of this little box, basically saying, no, put it onto the visual first, whatever you need from the model, put it on your visual matrix. You don't have to show it on the matrix, on the visual, but just put it on the visual matrix. So then we know what the values are. You can check the results, and then you work with those values. Okay? Most important slide of this whole talk. Cool. I think it is high time to show you this in a demo. Let's see if I can actually make the switch here. That would be great. Okay.
I was waiting for you to pull out the Patrick LeBlanc. Now let's hop into Power BI.
Right, exactly. Let's what is it? Go over to my laptop. I think something like that, right?
Something like that. Yep.
We're not all copies of each other, though. We may sound similar, but we're not all copies of each other. So I'm not gonna steal that line from him.
I like it. Yep.
So you see my Power BI desktop here.
Yep.
Which is the live Power BI desktop version. This is not trickery. This is live into the product that you can have on your machine as well. This is not a pre-release version. There's nothing special here. It's just literally just Power BI desktop that you might have on your machine right now. So I'm going to build a very simple visual. I'm going to do fiscal year, basically replicating the thing that I just had on the whoopsie, what's happening here? Okay, I think I actually deleted a measure. Okay, great. So I need to create a new measure just in real quick because I wanted to work with the cost. So I'm just going to say, and here's again what I said, right? And I'm going to zoom in this just a second so you can see me typing. There we go. So I'm going to do sales product standard cost, I think it was called. So here's the thing, right? This aggregate, that the fact that I have to sum this, right, is already tricky for some people, because if I want to subtract this from, want to subtract something else from this, let's say I want to subtract sales, total sales, you would have to either have a measure or you would have another aggregate. So just doing cost minus or sales minus cost is what's tripping people up. You need that aggregate, that sum in there. So I'm defining this measure because I apparently deleted it, not part of the original demo, by the way. So now I have the extra measure. So I'm now recreating that column chart that we had on the slide just a second ago. So let me make that into an actual column chart. That would be great. Let me sort that by fiscal year and ascending. So we basically now have the same column chart as before, right? It is showing the 3 groups that I promised, fiscal year, and then the 2 measures. Cool. So on here, I can now define a visual calculation. You do that by selecting the visual you want to work on. Remember, calculations are scoped to the visual. They're part of the visual. So for you to do a calculation, you need to select the visual you want to work on, right? If you deselect the visual, you'll see that the button for new visual calculation is disabled because you need to select the visual. There's multiple ways to get here. You can either do this. It's a right-click menu. There is a new visual calculation option, and we even added it in here. And if you have on object enabled, you can also find it in there. So then I'm going to skip over these shortcuts for a little bit and just going to click this button. And this window, let me make some more room over here. This window should feel very familiar now because I just showed you that on the slide, right? I showed you this little thing, but now it's in the product. It's the visual that I selected. It's the formula bar that I promised, and then the visual matrix at the bottom, which is, and you can check it, the representation of the data that we're looking at in this visual. I can change the visual type. The visual matrix will still stay the same because it's the representation of what's in the visual. Make sense? Cool. So now here, I can start adding my calculations. And I'm going to start with something that I know should have been a measure, right? Because we have sales, we have cost. So obviously, everybody is going to be interested in profit. And that's going to be such a common thing that you should actually have wrote that in a measure, but you would have to have sum of total sales minus sum of cost, and then you would have your your profit. Here, I can just say profit equals, let me zoom in, profit equals total sales minus cost. A couple things happening here. Notice there's no table because in this case, there is no table. This could have come from multiple different tables in multiple different parts of your model. I don't care. For all intents and purposes, for visual calcs, there's just one table that literally only contains the rows that I can look at and the columns that I can look at. So I can just refer to whatever I see here. In fact, if I go and add this, you will see this actually works, right? Profit is now calculated row by row by row, like I calculate a column, taking total sales minus cost for each year and the total. Make sense? Very simple. In fact, I can go and change this thing and rename this to, let's say, what are we going to do? I'm going to rename this to Alina's sales amount, total sales, sorry for using your name there. But now you see that it's renamed. Great. You see it's renamed on the visual. You see it's renamed on the visual matrix. My profit is still working because it's referring to the name that's on the visual matrix, right? It's literally the stuff you can see that you're working with. Okay, great. So now I have a profit. Yes, that should have been a measure. Sure, but just an easy start. Okay, cool. So now let's do another one. Let's do something more intelligent. I want to calculate the difference for profit for each year versus the year previous. Okay, so for 2018, I want to take the difference in profit for that year minus nothing because there's no earlier year. For 2019, I want to calculate in profit for that year versus 2018, for 2020, for 2019. That's what I want to do, okay? That's the goal I have. So I'm going to say something, let's say profit diff. I'm going to say, well, what do I need to do? Oh, I need profit. Look, I can refer to profit here. And I need something else. I need the previous year's profit. I'm wondering what function should I be using in Power BI in DAX to get the previous profit? Any guesses to the function name for this? For the previous profit? How about previous? Would it really be that simple? Well, let's try. Perfect. Previous profit. Look, this is almost just like English. I can type it. I can understand this. Anybody with basic understanding of Excel formulas knows inherently what this does. Profit minus the previous profit. Will this work? Of course it works. Who made this? I did. Okay, that's why it works. Look, the profit is here. Let's do something more intelligent. How about a running sum? We've been talking about that. Okay, so you don't have to invent all these functions. We actually give you shortcuts. Okay, so what is the function name I will be using to do a running sum? Any guesses to the function name for doing a running sum? You should know how my brain works by now. You can click in here, you'll find templates, and then you can just click any of these. And I'm just going to do it and say the function name is called running sum. Of course it's called running sum. Can it be any easier? No. So I want to do a running sum of the profit. Will this work? Well, of course it works. I made this. Okay, let's do one more. Moving average. I want to do a moving average of profit. I want to do a moving average of 2 years. All right, so for 2018, just return the profit. For 2019, take the average between 2018 and 2019 profit divided by 2. Well, basically, that's the average. And return that value for 2020, take 2019, 2020, calculate the average there. What will be the function for moving average? Well, this should be easy by now, right? It is called moving average. It doesn't get much easier. So, yeah, let's see. Profit. And then I need to specify a window size, and I need to specify a window size of 2. What does this mean? For every slice, or every row, look at the current row and then one above it. So the total window size is 2. And then it slides over the thing down. So for 2019, the thing that's in scope is 2018 plus 2019. For 2020 is 19 plus 20, etc. Right? Will this work? Of course it works. Very, very simple stuff. Very powerful as well. Imagine writing this in original DAX. Horrible, if not impossible. So now that we're done with this, I kind of screwed up my visual, right? Because, the visual is pretty ugly. It's showing all this stuff. And honestly, I didn't want to show all that. What I actually needed is just the profit difference in each year. And I wanted to show the running sum and the moving average in the tooltips. But how will I do that? Well, remember, visual calcs can only refer to what's on the visual. So profit is dependent on Alina's total sales and cost, right? We saw that in the expression. Profit diff is depending on profit. Running sum is dependent on profit. Moving average is dependent on profit. So can I delete any of these? No. Because if I did, the whole thing will break, like a house of cards. What do? Well, if you look over here, you might notice a familiar icon you've seen before. You can actually decide to hide things from the visual matrix, from the visual, still show them on the visual matrix. So you can still refer to those, you can still check the results, but you're just not showing them in the end result. Okay, so I'm going to hide the stuff that I don't care about. If I could actually click, that would be great. And I'm going to, I'm going to move running sum and moving average to the tooltips. Now you've seen it happening already, but if I zoom out, you'll see that the chart is now simple. The difference, as promised, the tooltips contain the running sum and the moving average and the profit diff. The visual matrix hasn't changed because the stuff is still on there. I'm just not showing it in the visual. And when we're back out into the report, this, arguably the most beautiful chart you've ever seen in your life, of course not, is a very powerful chart that I created using very simple DAX. It shows a couple things that are not easy to do: a running sum, a moving average, and a versus previous calculation. And I was able to write those in just 4 lines of very simple, almost English type DAX. This, you all, is the power of visual calculations. This is why we're doing this, because now it's simple. Okay,
I feel like there
cool.
needs to be a roar of the crowd at this point, but
well,
like
it's basically a little bit like this, right?
Nice.
This is literally the kind of reaction I get often when we do this in person. People go like, where has this been all my life? Well, yeah, it only took us 4 years to build this. Uh, so just to summarize what I've been talking about. And by the way, if you feel compelled to share on any social media, even the social media that I'm not on, about visual calculations and Power BI using either of these hashtags, or mostly Power BI and visual calculations, that would make my day. You don't have to, but it would be awesome if you would do that. And of course, start using visual calculations. That would be even better. So what are visual calculations? Well, they're DAX calculations in scope of a visual. And in support thereof, we have new functions and new concepts that we are introducing. Visual matrix, hidden, etc., etc. New functions, running sum, moving average, previous, and others. Cool. So it is just DAX. It's not a new language. So any DAX, most DAX, I should say, will work. If you have an order category calculator column, that is a switch true statement that divides your orders into small, medium, large. You can literally copy paste this thing into a visual calculation. It will just work assuming sales amount is on the visual. Basic arithmetic will work. What I said, profit minus is sales minus cost. That doesn't need aggregates. This is how you would do it in Excel. This is literally what trips a lot of people up. And then we have new functions, a couple of which I've been showing you. To hammer home the point, let's do a running sum of sales amount over year. Here's how you would write it on the top here in the middle of the slide, how you would write it using normal DAX. Arguably not the most complicated DAX in the world, but it includes a calculator, sum, a filter, all selected is on or after with a max of date year. I don't think any user that is brand new to Power BI will be able to just write this right away. Doesn't work that way, right? I would argue they would feel comfortable just writing the thing that's here at the bottom. Running sum, sales amount, done. Same exact result. Let's do something more intelligent. Given a list of states and a number of restaurants per state, for each state, calculate the difference in the number of restaurants in that state versus the one above. On the left here is the current DAX you would have to write. I'll level with you, I was not able to write this. I gave up after a couple hours and I called Jeffrey. Jeffrey opened Notepad, started typing, and this is what he did. And literally not kidding, just Notepad without any help, perfect DAX. And I saw it happening and I went like, yes, I understand the summarize, I understand the selected value, the top and one trick is what hit me. I was like, of course. It's like seeing God's creation, right? Like something happening in front of your eyes, you go like, yes, of course, but I would never have come up with this myself. And then you return some value. Now, we introduced window functions in December 2022 already. If you go reread the blog about it, you will see that I was biting my tongue because I was showing you the Lego pieces I was using to build this house that has now become visual calculations. But I was not allowed to talk about visual calculations yet. But essentially, visual calcs are built on top of window functions. So with window functions that you can use in measures and calculator columns and visual calcs, this becomes way easier. If you look on the right here, you'll see that the same expression is much easier with a calculate with an offset of -1 with the correct order by. And then, of course, the visual calcs version of this, which I already showed you, is even easier still, right? But this is how we built this whole thing, is that once you understand visual calcs, you will actually be using window functions under the covers. That means if visual calcs, because of how easy they are, don't give you the flexibility you require for your scenario, you can go one level deeper and use window functions to do the same stuff as visual calcs can do. But then it will be slightly harder, but also more flexible. So what are we talking about here? We have multiple levels of functions, right? The low level functions are window functions. Those you can use in measures, calculator columns, and visual calcs. And then the medium and high level functions are the stuff that I showed you already in the demo. You can only use the medium high level functions in visual calcs. You cannot use those in measures and in calculator columns. And the reason is something I have been hiding from you in this whole demo. They actually refer to the visual structure that I've been talking about. We'll get to that in just a sec. So low-level functions, offset, index, window, rank, row number, supported by, order by, potential by, and match by. I won't go into all of this. You can read about it. They exist since December 2022. If you come from the SQL background, you might be familiar with some of these names. There's a whole world out there of understanding how these things work. But just know that these are the foundation under the easier to use versions of those. And then we go one level up. We go to the medium level functions. So previous is a movement upwards or leftwards in my matrix. Next is a movement downwards or to the right in my matrix. First is a move to the beginning, and last is to move to the end. Right? These are shortcuts. Previous is a shortcut to offset -1. Next is a shortcut to offset 1. First is a shortcut to index 1, and last is a shortcut to index -1. So you see these are shortcuts to those window functions. You have an is at level inspection function that allows you to check whether or not you're on certain subtotals, like quarters or month subtotals, and then you can return custom totals. So for those of you that think that matrix totals are wrong in Power BI, by the way, you're wrong about that. But if you think that, you can now fix that using if is at level. You can check you're in the total and then return a different result, other than what Power BI would normally do. And then we have specific functions that allow you to walk a hierarchy downwards with expanding, or walking the hierarchy upwards with collapsing. So if you want to do an average of children calculation, which is also very hard to do, you use expand. If you want to do a percentage of parents, you use collapse. See how this is almost English? And then we also have a way of defining ranges easily with the range function. And then we have two high-level functions, both of which I've already shown you, running sum, moving average. Cool. So with the functions out of the way, we need to talk about concepts. Visual matrix is the matrix that represents the data in the visual. We have already been talking about that at length. We don't need to talk about it anymore. It's very simple to understand. There's a couple of concepts that I need you to understand. Axis is actually what makes this whole thing work. I've been using Axis all the time in all of my demos so far, but you've never seen it because it has a default value. We'll talk about that, what it is. And then reset allows you to define what happens with the calculation. So Axis defines how the calculation traverses this visual matrix. Will it go top to bottom, left to right, or some other pattern? Okay, row by row, column by column, or some other pattern. And then reset basically says, while I'm walking in this direction, in this axis over this matrix, do I at any point want to restart the calculation? If I do, I can specify that using reset. Direction is just a combination of those two things. Hidden is what I already have been showing you. A field is on the visual matrix, but is not shown on the visual. So out of the concepts on this slide, there's two complicated ones, axis and reset. The other things you're already comfortable with. So axis. Think of axis as how the calculation traverses the visual matrix. By default, it's set to rows. That means it's going across the rows. And in case you're like me and you sometimes forget that rows are horizontal, we actually show you a little icon in the product that shows downwards pointing arrows going, it's top to bottom, across the rows, right? If you write columns, we go left to right. Okay, so we go left to right across the columns, and we show you the little icon again. And you can also combine these things. You can combine columns rows and rows columns to do snaking patterns across your visual matrix. So you go top to bottom first and then across the columns. So you get almost like an N movement. Or you go across the columns first and then across the rows like a Z pattern, snaking over your visual matrix. Why did we put those two in there? We could. Simply because we could. Sometimes you need those, but arguably you would probably never, like in your real life, the amount of times you would need those are very, very slim. There's a specific example that I have in mind for these. But rows and columns is what you'll be using most often. So let's look at what that would look like. So remember, the default is rows, right? I have been writing rows all the time, but I didn't specify it. In fact, if I go back to the demo real quick, I can show you if I did, let's go in here, edit calculation. If I did this, running sum profit, comma, I can write rows, and you can see that this literally is the icon I promised you, right? The little thing. Does this change anything? No, because look at the numbers over here, 13 million, 35, 65. It shouldn't change because rows is the default. It defines top to bottom. I can also go left to right, columns, right? I just write columns, or I write a combination of those to get a different behavior. So that's where the axis sits. Okay, cool. So let's look at some detailed examples of these. Now, this one is simple. First sales amount on rows, or just first sales amount because rows is default. Okay, For each row, retrieve the first sales amount from the first row. Look at the color coding. The dashed lines refer to the solid lines. So you can check the results, right? For each column, for each year, in this case, we'll get the sales amount for the first accessory, right? Because that happens to be on rows. And so we're getting the first sales amount, for the first category. So that's always the sales amount for accessories, right? That is always just repeated, but then column by column. So for 2019, it's the value for accessories in 2019, right? Same thing happens. Make sense? I think this is simple to understand. Now we do a 90-degree turn. Retrieve the first sales amount on columns. For each column, retrieve the sales amount from the first column. Okay, so what we're doing, for each row, I should say, I think is this. Actually, for each row, retrieve the first sales amount from the first column. So what this will do is per category, because that's on rows, get me the first year's sales amount, right? Dashed lines refer to solid lines. So calculation for FY 2018 accessories is going to be the number for FY 2018 accessories. 2019 accessories is going to be the number for 2018 accessories. A first, right? So row by row by row. Very simple. Dashed lines refer to solid lines. You can see how this works. The icon helps to understand how this thing is calculated. Now for the brain-breaking part. Let's do the combinations. Okay? Let's do previous sales amount on rows columns. So for each cell, retrieve the previous sales amount from the row above it or from the last cell in the previous column. So let's look at some examples. This cell is empty. Why? There's no row above me. There's no column to the left of me. This one refers to this one. It's easy. Row above me. This one refers to that one, that one, that one. Easy. This one is not empty. Why? There's no row above me, but there's a column to the left of me. So I'm allowed to take the last value of the previous column and snake over it this way. Would you ever use this? Yes, if quarter number was on rows and you wanted to do a moving average over 3 quarters, spanning years. You would actually use this. Otherwise, if you're any sane, you'll probably never use this. And then, of course, 90-degree turn, we do the same thing, right? This cell is empty. Why? There's no column to the left of me. There's no row above me. This cell, well, column to the left of me, get the value. This cell, there's a column to the left of me, get the value. This cell is not empty, although there's no column to the left of me, because I wrote columns rows, I can, if there's no column to the left of me, I'm allowed to take the last value of the row above me. So that's that why. This one, of course, takes the value from the column to the left of me. So this is the Z-snaking pattern. Okay, cool. So while I'm doing that, I can also decide to reset. I can say, while I'm moving over this calculation, over this visual matrix, I can restart. So for example, if I did a running sum over quarters in multiple years, your customer probably want to see a running sum within the year. They don't want the running sum to continue when the year changes, right? Come January, you have a new year. You don't want the running sum to continue. You want the running sum to restart from 0 for that new year. You just wrote running sum of sales. What it will do is to happily continue summing across the years. You didn't want that. What you do now is you just say running sum sales reset year. That means every time year changes its value, restart the calculation. So when the year changes from 2014 to 2024, to 2025, restart the calculation from 0. So your running sum will then just be the value for Q1 in 2025, and then the value for Q2 in 2025 added to it. So your running sum will fit within the year. You can also have relative resets, lowest and highest parent, or a specific number on an axis, but you can also just do an explicit field reference. So that's all the concepts you need to know about visual calculations. And then once you put those together, you basically get all of these combinations: row, columns, columns, rows, rows, columns, rows, columns, columns with reset, rows with reset, etc., etc., etc. So you can work with all of this and play to your heart's content. Now, the concept of hidden, I already explained to you, and I'll skip over. So the one last thing I want to say here is you might be sitting here and saying, where's calculate? Well, calculate is actually still here. We're not taking anything away from you, as I promised. What we're doing here is we're hiding it from you. You just, when you wrote first sales amount on year, or first sales on year, what you actually wrote is calculate sales on the first of year. And then it's actually because first is a shortcut to index. It actually calculates sales on the index 1 of year. So we're basically showing you this layered way of working, and you can work with the simplest version as far as you need it or feel comfortable with, and you can make everything you need there, but you can also dive deeper as you need it to do more flexible calculations. Why are we doing this? Calculators scary to many people. It includes filter context and context transition. That's what makes DAX hard, as I said in the beginning. We're not trying to hide it from you. So I like to think about my DAX world as a donut. If you walk on the sticky surface, life is good. Life is sweet. Yes, you're sticking, but it's okay. It's good, right? It's sweet stuff you're sticking. That's awesome. But there's a hole in the middle. And that's where the infinite complexity lives. That's where filter context transition lives. And instead of trying to turn DAX into a pancake, we're not trying to do that. We're just trying to make the donut thicker, so you can walk on the rim a little longer. Yes, all the flexibility and complexity will still be there. You can use it. You don't have to do it on day one. You don't have to read through those books on day one. You just get a little bit more time to ease yourself into it. And that's the whole idea. So with that, we have exactly 1 minute left. And I'm happy to take more questions, and some questions that can also hang out a little bit longer, not a problem at all. But I will leave you with this meme, and I also will leave you with the request to use visual calculations. It's available to you today in Power BI. You can use it in desktop or in the web. You don't even have to turn it on if you have the September version or later installed. And try it. Let me know what you think. Go to this link, visual-calculations-feedback, and tell us what you think, because this is the moment for you to influence what this feature is doing. So, right on cue, 1 p.m.
Well done, Jay.
It's like I've done this before.
Nope, no way. No way. Does anyone have any follow-up questions?
I have a question if no one else does.
Go for it.
Okay, cool. So this is actually really familiar to a problem that I've been dealing with on our current project. So I'm excited to see that there's, a simpler solution, a little after the fact, since I've been struggling with it, but hopefully we won't have to struggle with it again in the future. So when you're doing like a running total or a running sum, and there were like the fiscal years available for selection, if you were to like deselect some of those fiscal years, could you still keep them in the running total? Like say I only care about 2022, like by filtering the matrix to only include that row, would it be possible to include the prior years in the total, or would it just be that 1 year?
Well, think about what I said.
Yeah.
What does the calculation refer to?
It refers to the matrix, but is it possible to like hide it?
No.
Okay.
What you see on the matrix is what it plays with. So
Gotcha.
if the data is not on the matrix, then you cannot include it in a running sum.
Is it possible to hide it from the visual if it's still in the matrix underneath?
No, you cannot hide those grouping columns from the visual now.
Gotcha.
So if you filter, for example, the years to exclude that 1 year that you are not interested in, then your visual calculation will update, because the visual matrix is now no longer showing that visual. That's showing that 1 year. You could work around this by giving, well, there's a couple of things you could do. You could either write a measure that gives you that total for that specific year, put that measure onto your visual matrix, hide that, and then use that in your calculation.
Yeah.
Right? So I could say, I'm going to write a measure, right? I could say, and this is, of course, going to be tricky. Can I actually do this live? So you could do something like this, right? You could say total sales for, what is it, calendar, what is the actual fiscal year something, right, is this, right? You could do this, right?
Yep.
And then I could add that into here. Oh, I put it on the currency table. Whatever, live demos. Doesn't matter. Gonna throw it away anyway. Okay, so I'm gonna go in here, and now I'm going to filter this visual and say, no, I don't want to see FY. What did I do? 2018? I think so. So I don't want to see FY 2018 anymore. So now my running sum will only contain 2019 and 2020 and 2021, because there's no sales for that in this data set. What I'm going to do is hide this measure, and then my running sum can still be the measure value plus the running sum. They have
Mm,
essentially what you wanted, right?
yeah. Clever.
Tricky.
This is one way of doing it. There's another trick you could potentially do. Although in your specific scenario, this might actually break, but it allows me to show you something that is not ready for you to use yet. But I could actually say, what if I'm only interested in one specific value, right? Let's say I need the profit for 2020. I need that value all the time. So I want just this cell to be returned to me. How could I do that? Think about this as an Excel spreadsheet. What would I probably write? Which function would I be using in Excel to get this value? Maybe something called lookup?
That's where my mind went to.
X lookup, V lookup, H lookup, that kind of thing.
Like, yep.
Would be great if somebody introduced a function called lookup. So,
Genius.
will this work? Is lookup. I wanted the profit, and then I wanted the profit for fiscal year, and I want the fiscal year to be FY 2020. That's what I said. And will this work? Of course this works.
Oh, okay, that's very cool.
So this will just return that value, and I can use that value to do other things with. You can hide that visual calculation again. You only have to show the end result. You don't have to show how you got here. You can hide all of that under the covers, right? I can hide, will this work? I can hide measure, right? But it still will be on my visual matrix. I can play with all that stuff. So that's another way of kind of using that thing to your heart's content. Although it won't solve your specific example, Alina, because if you filter out that 1 year, it's not going to be there anymore, right? The lookup will just return nothing because, well, if that year is not on my visual.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think the lookup solves the problem, though. If you just want to select like a single year and see the running total up until that point in time, this is perfect.
Yep. So that's what lookup will do. Now, lookup is actually already available. But once you start typing it, you'll see you'll get red squigglies. That's because we simply haven't finished the work and there's a couple more bugs to iron out. But this function is already available in your version on your machine if you try it out today. But it's simply not supported because there's a couple more bugs that we have to fix. So stay tuned for an update on that, and we'll update our docs once it's actually ready. But you can already start playing with this a little bit. Don't tell anybody.
Function.
Secret
bonus
scoop.
function.
Yeah.
Oh, there's more, but I'm not ready to talk about those yet.
We'll save it for next time.
So this is your challenge to start trying to find them, actually.
Can only reveal so many secrets.
Yep. There needs to be some mystery.
Yeah. So Jay, is this publicly available? Is it in preview? Is it out of preview? Where are we at?
It's in public preview since February of this year.
Okay.
And we're still chugging along. There's a bunch of stuff that we are building and still adding to this. And I cannot publicly say anything about GA timelines or whatever. But there's a whole team working on this every month. It's a very tough feature. It's very slow to build this because it needs to be so specific. You need to make sure it works with any visual, right? And we need to make sure that we have this continuous consistency between the visual and the visual matrix. So that's why it's a slow feature. It took us 4 years to get to the point that we are just into public preview. So it will take a little bit longer, but we're still working on it. So every month we add new stuff, new functions, new functionality, filtering, conditional formatting, support for field parameters, exporting, that kind of stuff is stuff that we've been recently doing or are still working on.
I dropped in the link for the Microsoft Learn page. Are there any other resources that you'd recommend for people to learn more about visual calculations, or is the Microsoft Learn the best place to go?
That's the one. The thing I use to share whenever I do something new with this tool. I would also, there's a link on that same page, but I'll just paste it in here, which is actually a learning module. So that's not the Learn page. It's a trainings module.
Oh, yeah.
Where you can just do some exercises, answer some questions. So that's another one to look at. And then if you are interested in comparing the various calculation options that Power BI offers, including custom columns in M, but also calculated tables, calculation groups, calculated columns and measures, and visual calcs. There's another link on that same page that allows you to compare all of these, so it kind of helps you figure that out. But on top of that, I would absolutely recommend using the resources in the community. There's loads of people that have written blogs and made videos about visual calculations on YouTube, and have written blogs on social media as well about how they use it. There's a whole bunch of nifty tricks that people are doing with visual calculations. So yeah, absolutely don't limit yourself to just reading our official documentation. Just search for Power BI visual calculation. I think maybe visual calculation within like quotes, so you force it to be visual calculation, not just visual and calculation. Right. And then you will find whatever you want to do with that. So yeah, I would absolutely recommend those. And stay tuned for more, right? Awesome. At some point, somebody should write a book about this. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how this happens. Or maybe this book will at some point get updated. Yeah. With a specific chapter on visual calcs. Who knows?
I wouldn't like that, because then that would make my existing book defunct, and then I'd have to buy a copy.
Well, or
so I'm looking for a new one. I'm looking for a new
book. The authors and you get it for free and signed.
Hey,
no, just kidding.
Nice. Any other questions from the group? We got a quiet group today, but just want to check in.
Well, that's either because it's completely clear, which I doubt, or it's completely irrelevant. So it's up to you to make those choices. Which one it is?
Love it.
Just joking, of course. But if you have no further questions and you feel a little bit overwhelmed right now, don't worry. We're here to help. You can review this after we post the recording. The training pages are here for you, but also just, feel free to reach out, right? Try it. Give me feedback. If you go to this link and say, hey, I tried this, but this doesn't work, or why did you do it this way? I will respond. I will help, because I need you to use this feature. Because the only way I'm going to keep this team working and working and working on this is if more people use this feature, right? This is one of those long-running features forever, right? And for us to be able to make DAX easier for everyone, including myself, as I've explained in the beginning, we need to ship this to an end state that I had in mind, and we just need you to use that feature. So try it. Just click that new calculation button the next time you're tempted to click new measure and go like, oh, can I actually do this in a new calculation? Will it be easier? Will it be faster? Well, the answer to those questions is yes and yes.
Right. Love it. Well, thanks, Jay. We've taken up more than enough of your time. I'm sure that people will be reaching out with thoughts and feedback, and I'm excited to jump in.
I think I owed you a little bit since moving it twice, so,
Yeah, come on. Can't you just, the next time a bomb cyclone comes through, could you just stop it, or or just prevent any power outages at all? That'd be great.
That would be awesome.
That would be awesome. We would all appreciate that. But
yeah, for sure.
Really appreciate all your time. It's been a great session, and we'd love to have you back again.
Oh yeah, for sure. Anytime. And as soon as I can share anything else of the stuff that I'm working on, I'm happy to be back. And since I'm local, if you guys meet up in person, we can also do that at some point. That would be lovely as well. And stay. Keep working with Power BI, and let us know what you think. And of course, try visual calcs and give me feedback. I've been saying that 20 times now.
Great. All right. Well, with that, thanks everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Happy holidays. Thanks, Jay.
Happy holidays.